start with public comment, but I'll read the statement. The Pennridge School Board welcomes public comment. According to Policy 903, we remind everyone of the following. Public comment shall be limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise specified by the board. Participants must be recognized by the presiding officer and note their name and municipality. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer rather than to individual board members, district employees, or members of the public. A speaker may speak once during each comment period. Please note that these sessions are designated for comments. To protect the confidentiality and privacy rights of all members of our community, the board encourages members of the public to direct any comments regarding particular individuals, such as students or district employees, privately to the superintendent or other appropriate administrators or board members, or to communicate with the board and superintendent privately by sending an email to psdschoolboard@pennridge.org. Questions raised and not addressed may be followed up at a later time. No one signed up. You're the only member of the public. So there's no public comment. We'll just go to our first agenda item, which is the Being a Writer Grade 6 program. Mr. Chapicki.
Okay. I think you're all familiar, at least in terms of where we've been for the past few years, with our elementary writing program, Being a Writer, and now with our elementary making the English reading program that we are piloting at the elementary. When we saw the success of Being a Writer in the elementary, last year we decided to do a pilot in 6th grade because the program itself is actually a K-6 program in whole. And we were also in a situation where we're looking to make some changes to the curriculum and to programming in 6th grade, and also, as you know, writing is something we really want to focus on. So things kind of fell into place really well because a team of reading specialists and elementary teachers, along with Stephanie Washington, put a lot of work and time and energy into selecting the Being a Writer program for K-5, and it just became a real natural fit for us to go ahead and pilot it. And we've had a good run of piloting it this year with 6 different teachers in all 3 middle schools. We met in late fall to talk to the middle school principals along with those teachers. We also spent some time, I also spent some time with teachers and the Center for Collaborative Learning, the purveyor of this program. We spent some time doing some virtual training and discussing and collaborating, things like that. The teachers have also spent some time working with the Center for Collaborative Learning on what they call lesson study, where the center comes in and they do a lesson in a classroom. And the teachers are part of not with the students, but certainly in the room to observe this, and then they go to another room and they process it and they learn about it. So that's why we are proposing that we move this in its entirety into 6th grade for our language arts classrooms. As you might know, in 6th grade we have reading classes and we also have language arts classes. Language arts would focus on more of the writing end of things and reading, certainly on the reading skills and strategies. But of course, in both classrooms, we expect that there would be some reading and writing going on as appropriate for those subject areas. So we're hoping to do that for next year. There are a couple, and I know you can see that I'm moving my screen, so it's going to move that screen. You can see there's a couple different variables on there. Oh, I'm sorry, a couple different items on there. It talks about the writing goals, how it serves the 21st century, looking at as a district, and also addresses varying abilities. There's a lot of great conversations going on in the 6th grade because, as you can imagine, 6th grade classrooms and scheduling configurations and teacher assignments look different than they do in the elementary schools. And there's been some great discussions because what it's forcing us to do is to really take a look across the board at our RELA programming in not only writing but also in reading, and how we can make sure that they're aligned, they're communicating with each other, and then ultimately we're looking forward to see how students come up through 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then into 6th grade in this continuity of language, this continuity of a program, and really get all those teachers talking together. And then also, as we move into looking at curriculum revision in 7th and 8th grade, certainly the best parts of the program we can certainly carry over in terms of strategies and language and One thing I did include on there on the course program outline is the scope and sequence. I want to apologize, it is a big PDF document. I tried to cut it up, but every time you pasted it on something else, didn't quite work out. But if you open that up and you use your fingers and you just take a look at it, you can look closer at some of the various units, whether it's narrative writing or the expository writing. I will just mention that actually page 2 and 3 are being a writer. Page 1 is making meaning. But it's actually good to get a sense of what goes on in making meaning as well and how the programs do align. At this point, haven't had any discussions about making meaning in 6th grade, but we certainly want to move forward with being a writer in 6th grade. And you can see down the bottom there the cost numbers that were put in front of us from the Center for Collaborative Learning. Now, a couple small caveats, which I hope to be good caveats, is that at this point, we really don't know the exact number of teachers because we haven't gone through the scheduling process yet. We haven't gone through the recommendation process yet. And we've asked the middle school principals to take a good look at the schedule and make sure we do the best we can to get, to configure things well, to have teachers teaching multiple sections in one way or another, so that the Being a Writer program can be more consistent. And also, on the professional development costs, we're kind of going back and forth a little bit with the Center for Collaborative Learning on some of those costs. So I certainly wouldn't guarantee it, but I do believe these costs may come in a little lower than they're listed. That's my hope anyway. What are your questions?
I do.
Sure.
I have a couple things that I just really appreciate, but I also have a couple questions. I'm looking at the scope and sequence.
Yes.
And I just really appreciate the level of detail in terms of one of the things that I think we look for on a scope and sequence is just if you were a brand new teacher to this course, would this document be enough to get you started in terms of the overview and then your colleagues and all the supplies and things like that? So I love the left-hand side in terms of the writing focus, the skill focus, as well as the independent practice focus and that piece. And the fact that as you plan over, if you look at the length, they don't plan for a full school year on purpose, right? So they plan for about 30 weeks, and I think that's a pretty sound strategy in terms of assessments and days missed, as well as teachable moments. Poetry might take 2.5 weeks instead of 2. So to be able to have that play there, I think is really, really powerful. List a lot of text under all of those. Are some of them required and some of them optional? Are they all optional within the program? Is there a way to denote the ones so that we know, like, common 6th grade experiences across all 3 middle schools versus the teacher has some play, which is, I think, pretty common for your curriculum?
Right. When the teachers get together and talk through this, and the next opportunity we're going to have for this, probably on the 28th,
Okay.
is then I'll have the professional development and collaboration day. They're going to talk through that probably and have those conversations, what worked, what didn't work, what we're planning going forward, because we're obviously going to be about the halfway mark. But there is room in there. If you look at for instance, in the writing community in the first unit, there are a couple different selections that are basically about an author. So what they do is they look into the life of an author and what an author does. And they might have a couple different ones. To look at their craft and look at some of the works they've done. So they would have a different, they'd be able to select one or the other depending on their audience and what didn't work last year. They can also talk to 5th grade because 5th grade is in full swing now. The entire 5th grade is doing this. 5th grade will have a lot of great information for our 6th grade teachers in terms of what worked, what didn't. You spoke about the 30 weeks, which sounds, wow, there's so much room in there, but when you take 30 weeks in the school year, there are so many things that we can't predict. There are so many, whether we have snow day or not, whether the news station announces it the right way or not, but either way, things happen that we can't predict. The other piece of this program is that the Being a Writer program is designed for just a little bit more class time than we have in the middle schools. So that gives us that flexibility to fit that in. We also look at, and I guess one differentiation I'd like to make is that a program is not necessarily a curriculum. It provides curriculum, it provides resources, it provides lots of resources for our teachers, but it's not necessarily our entire curriculum. So there is also room in there for us to customize and us to put pieces in there that maybe after a year or two, we're gonna say, you know what, I think we still need to do this, so let's take the time to put that together. Or maybe we wanna look at emphasizing poetry in a different way in 5th grade than we do in 6th grade. So there's a lot of room there, especially with that vertical alignment and that continuity is something we've never really had before, especially going from elementary to middle school. So we're pretty excited about that, because those conversations are really, I think, are really beneficial to everybody.
And if I could just comment, on the conversations with 6th grade teachers who are currently piloting this, their enthusiasm mirrors the enthusiasm of the elementary teachers. They're seeing what we see at the elementary school, the value of teaching the writer. They're working out the logistics, as Mr. Japukli was talking about, in terms of there are 44-minute classes and we have 60-minute classes, and how does that work? And there's some flexibility in there. But in terms of the resources that we have in the mentor texts, there is flexibility within that, if that was your original question. Because you don't, that's really another beauty of that program. The mentor texts are rich. They really are. And in some cases, teachers have a difficult time choosing which one, because they're all so good. But you can interchange those depending on which ones are defined for the skill development attached to that focus lesson.
So we have all these great materials for kids, mentor text, the experiences, the building a writing community, the continuity, and then on the teacher side that we have professional development. Now, professional development actually comes in 5 ways, and one of the ways is from ourselves, and that is from those conversations that I talked about between 5th and 6th grade teachers, because I don't think we ever want to look, we want to disregard that as being valuable professional development, because it is, because that's the program happening in Pennridge. It's not just the program in and of itself. The CCL Learning website, the Learning Hub, has a great deal of materials and resources for teachers to utilize. There are also video tutorials, some that we mandate that teachers walk through and take a little look through. So sometimes they're as simple as they just want to take you through the materials, because the amount of materials received as resources are pretty, it can be overwhelming if someone doesn't take you through and say, hey, here's what's going on, here's what you really need to focus on, here's what you can worry about later. And then, of course, there is, we provide virtual training, so we'll sit down like this and we'll say hello to someone that's CCLs there. Teachers will interact with that person and go through the materials and plan in that way. We actually, when we sat down with the representative back in October, she made us right. We sat down and wrote about a moment in our lives, and then we did exactly what we would expect kids to do. And one of the components of this writing and any good writing instruction is writing alongside your students. And I think that's a really fun and cool experience for our teachers and of course for our students. And then finally, there's the face-to-face time. We would like to see, we'd like to bring them in possibly in June or April, depending on when we figure out what the best day and time would be for them to come in face-to-face with our 6th grade teachers. And again, they will also provide in the fall, once we get rolling, a lesson study where they'll come in, stay in another classroom, model a couple things, teachers can watch, and they all get together and they'll process it together. And I think that's just, that kind of sums up all the variations of professional development part of this.
And this is in your program improvement?
Yes, it is, final one.
Budget, okay.
Yes, it's the last one for this school year for program improvement.
Okay, very good. Do you guys think you have any questions that you were thinking of about the be a writer? No?
No, I think you've already.
Yeah.
I've already beat
You've
this horse
expounded
to death
a lot
on
on it,
multiple
yes.
occasions, so.
I asked the question with hesitation, but, no, that's good. So then it will move forward to the board meeting agenda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if I could just ask before we move to the next agenda item, because I think that Mr. Japupi was making a really good point in terms of professional development. And he's talking about all of those components that we have seen successful at the elementary level. The one, I think, key piece of the professional development that we have seen the most success, and you know, Center for Collaborative Learning has been wonderful, but have been our own teachers. So when we went through that first year of just West Rock Hill teachers going through this professional development and learning that program, and now being able to do the turnkey training with our other teachers, that is a very successful professional development model. So that brings me to a discussion that I think that we should probably have, because at the last meeting we talked about the reading program at the elementary and why we do not recommend moving full-blown all 7 schools next year. And that is a really important question. It's a powerful question, and we have had really serious conversation about it. And one of the reasons why we are very reluctant to do that and still continue to recommend the model that we have in terms of providing the professional development, providing the whole pilot, and using that the next year for 2 schools is because it gives us the additional staff to do the turnkey training that we have already seen as a successful model. We currently do not have the internal capacity to be able to provide what we provided to West Rock Hill teachers for that to be a successful implementation. It does require that we have teachers with someone who's modeling these, and they do, the company does come out and they do that. And the reading specialist can support teachers. But the degree that we would need that for 7 schools is larger than that. And our recommendation really is dependent on those successful factors that we have already seen in place. So while nothing would make me personally happier than everybody getting it next year, I think I've said that many times, if we could do that, we would. But we do not have the internal capacity to do that well.
So, I totally agree. I don't like throwing out a lot of curriculum at the same time and overloading people. But we had Sellersville Elementary this year who took on being a writer and the reading program all at the same time. And what we're talking about is the other 5 schools. So 2 of them now don't really need as much aren't going to need as much additional support because they've already started to roll out those programs. So it's the other 5 elementary schools that we would be talking about. And next year, they already had the being a writer this year. So next year would be a second year of being a writer. Couldn't we just flip-flop next year and the following year so that they get the reading program next year and the second year of, improving the being a writer the following year, because they're already implementing it this year, and next year gives them another year of practice. But we've already seen that the reading program is not doing our kids any good, and it just, I don't like the idea of waiting 2 more years until 5 of our schools are exposed to it. And this would at least give them exposure to both of those programs next year, and then still continuing the extra professional development the following year. So there's my pitch.
You're good.
Because then, I worry that by the time they get to middle school, the 2 elementary schools that have had this program are going to be on a completely different level than the kids who haven't. Especially when you think about the kids who are in the upper end of the elementary grades right now, because they may transition without ever having any of the being a writer, or well, not being a writer, but the reading program. And so I'm just wondering, it's still going to take you the same amount of support, whether you're, because you're going to be doing that, you're going to be doing those things the next 2 years. So couldn't you just flip-flop them, right? Because you're still doing less than what Sellersville is doing altogether right now, and less than what West Rock Hill did, because West Rock Hill did the being a writer, and then the next year did the reading program. And so I assume you're going to be doing more of the being a writer, because they didn't get 2 years of that implementation first. So providing that extra support afterwards. Plus, I think the Sellersville teachers were saying how those two went hand in hand, and it was actually, they thought it was easier to do them together than to piecemeal it, because then they're gonna be changing things. They're gonna have to change things again when they're trying to pull the reading program in. And they already have to pick apart Reading Street because it doesn't cover all of the information that they need to cover before PSSAs, so it's not even being used the way it's intended to be used anyway.
So most of the things that you said are absolutely true. Not every teacher at either of those schools is using making meaning this year. So it's 3 teachers in one building, 3 teachers in the other, so it's alternate grade levels. So, and then they have the reading specialist at Sellersville, who's a guru in the program, who's supporting them right now. The end goal, so I'll do the reminder of what we're trying to accomplish at the elementary level is I'm sorry, I've been suffering with bronchitis and I have a scratchy voice. Anyway, is a balanced literacy approach. What we want to do, and we talked about this at the last meeting, is the 2 schools to have all the programs. So Words Their Way, which is the 5th component of all of this, that's all of those programs, all at once for the 2 schools. So the 2 schools get those supports to get all the kinks out to make sure this is a well-oiled machine so that we move all of that to the other 5 schools, right? Already going through the pitfalls of first year implementation with the supports that we are capable of giving to the 2 schools. In our estimation, it benefits the teachers and ultimately the students by providing the successful plan for the implementation for the next 5 schools, rather than getting Words Their Way, trying to push that all 5 in all 7 schools, that we really do not have all the supports to get to every building, to do the side-by-side coaching and mentoring to make that a successful program.
But aren't you doing that the following year anyway?
We're going to have 2 schools with all those teachers who've already been trained to help us support them. That's really the beauty of the original pilot that we saw work.
But I thought they already are trained.
No, everyone in the 2 schools next year will have all 5 components. Now we're going to
It's just
have,
a pilot in those 2 schools.
Yes,
It's
and
not
now-
everybody.
thank you. And they will be our support system as West Rock Hill teachers were for being a writer. We have seen that successful, honestly. Again, I understand what you're saying, I do. Some students won't get that. You know, Reading Street is a reading program, so students are still being taught. We know what were the missing links there, and that's what we're trying to make sure that those holes are all filled. But really, the big idea was to have a balanced literacy approach, that every student had decoding, encoding practice, vocabulary development, an excellent writing program, along with a developmentally appropriate reading component. All of them work together. And the things that you're talking about that aren't working with Being a Writer and Reading Street are absolutely true. It's hard to fit them in. So we do have, and we learned that from the teachers who piloted it, that it didn't work. As well as it works because making meaning and being a writer are meant to be taught together. They make perfect sense. If you learn one, that following year when we have all that support.
You're convincing me I'm right even more.
Well, I'm, okay, well, then.
I understand.
I do understand, it's a shame, it is a shame that some students won't have that experience.
I don't, right, I understand
to cut you
your
off.
point of view.
Lisa,
I really
No,
do.
I understand. I mean, I was here when Reading Street it was implemented, and it was overwhelming. And we were all overwhelmed. Then, I worked in another district where there is a lot of turnkey staff training, and the mood, and the excitement was a little bit different when I saw new approaches being introduced in that district than it was when I was here in Pennridge and they brought Reading Street out. And I see the value in, yes, you can have the professional staff come out from the company, but it's not the same as people that work in your district to know how things look actually in Pennridge, explaining things to you and working through things with you. So I see the value and the importance of having internal training with our own teachers, and I trust that you thought through this.
So,
And that you're never gonna make everybody happy, and it's never gonna be, the best for every single teacher. Some might want it a different way, but I'm assuming, you got some feedback
We
on
did.
them as well as?
We did.
Would you Do you want to do both all at the same time,
Well,
or?
wouldn't
There's
be at the same
relief
time, it
from
would still
the
be
staff
different
that we're
years.
not doing that.
So I want to go back to a point that you made, though. You said it quickly because it was what I was going to ask.
Oh,
How you're going to address the, for lack of a better word, the deficiencies of the other programs. So we can at least, even we want to accommodate the good rollout. We want it to be successful. But at the same time, if there are deficiencies there, I would like to think that we could address those somehow to at least give those kids that are missing out for the next 1 to 2 years
And that's a really
Um,
good question.
support.
Remember that everyone's still getting being a writer, so that is invaluable anyway. That is new, and that's skill development that they're all getting. Even though we are continue to use Reading Street in the 5 schools, all teachers have been trained in text-dependent analysis, which is a skill that they needed to learn that is outside the scope of Reading Street. So we've already started to do that anyway. So all students would be doing that. We are addressing to the degree that makes sense and possible areas of, and I hate to say deficiency, well, I guess I will say it because it is relatively deficient in terms of what the expectations are now in the state of Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah.
So everybody had to up their game, and that particular program really doesn't fit that mold. So you are right, but we have been doing that anyway.
Okay.
We've already started, we did that for the last few years on close reading, and if you're not familiar with that term, it just means that you're reading, students are taught to read different texts for different purposes. So you could reread a text, but you're reading it for a different purpose. What the state of Pennsylvania really wants students to be able to do is not answer these types of questions on the PSSA by just my personal experience. They want the text to be valuable and that you've read it deeply, you understand it deeply enough to make the connections to be able to do those responses. And how anyone feels about PSSAs, that is not a bad skill. That is a good skill that we should be developing with students. So over the past 4 years, we've been providing our teachers with professional development. And that's not excluding the other 5 schools. That's all 7 schools. Is it a perfect fit? No, it isn't. And I'm here to tell you that it isn't. But to the degree and extent possible that makes no sense, all students will be getting those skills. They just won't be getting the kind of that really built on community feel as you see in being a writer. But I don't want you to think that we're just going to leave the 5 schools and they just have to do Reading Street. There's so much more than that that happens now that will continue to happen. And they're really those big ideas. Text-dependent analysis just means I'm answering questions that are in the text. They're not just part of my past experience. It really does show that you have the ability to read deeply and you can read complex text and make connections. So please know all elementary staff has training in that. It isn't a perfect picture. I wish it was. It isn't, but I do believe, and we've had these conversations, that this is in the best interest of everyone, because if you train the teachers properly, they feel comfortable, they feel respected, they feel you're giving them all the support that they need. That's going to make them understand, grow professionally, and that's improved instruction for students. So ultimately, that's really what we're going for, is the student improvement of student achievement. And these are really complex skills. We're not reading and writing are even at the elementary level, and it takes time and expertise to develop them. And we have done, I think, under the leadership of Stephanie Washam, really a lot of professional development over the past 2 years to develop those underlying skills, whether you use this program, that program, or that program, that the teachers have the expertise to teach what is expected from them from at least the state standards and beyond. So asking for your confidence to know that we have given this a lot of thought. And please know, and Dr. Bolton will tell you, I was the first one to say, oh no, we have to do it all. But the more you think about it, and the more you understand what has worked well, very successful in a large school district. We're not a little school district. That we believe we're making the best decision for students and teachers.
Okay. I think it would be helpful, I mean, I can just see, when people hear, how things can go in the public sometimes. So if people can be assured that these, we're not rolling it out to everyone, we want to roll it out the proper way, but then also explain that these are things we've been doing and will continue to do to make sure all of the students are getting the same, quality. So maybe that will head
I
off.
appreciate that. I mean, I can imagine that parents in other buildings are going to want to know what my child isn't getting.
Yeah.
So I understand that, and and that's a really good point, to make sure that everybody does know what is happening at the buildings.
Mrs. Cullen, one more point. The teachers, the elementary teachers, the reading specialists, the literacy people, they're going to talk, they're going to get together, and good ideas tend to get wings. So if something's good going on, and they're not going to wait till next year, they're going to share it, because most of the teachers involved know where we need to go, and they might know what the deficiencies of Reading Street are. So when they have those conversations, when they get together, when they have those meetings, good ideas will take flight. So
Yeah.
there will be a spreading of ideas, and certainly with the text dependent analysis and things like that. So there will be at least an awareness of what's going on and what's to come, and so forth and so on.
Yeah, I can see that with, amongst people that work in the schools all the time, but as far as, the families, just letting them know that occurs. That you might save some grief, maybe, perhaps a little. I don't know. I can hope.
So did you say you surveyed the teachers and this is their preference?
No, I didn't say I surveyed the teachers. I said the response from the teachers when we've had the conversation is some, and I'm not saying all, I will never say all, I'm sure there's some teachers out there like, give it to me, I want it. There's some sense of relief is that elementary teachers have been going through change every year since I've been here. So that's this is my 5th year here. It's another change, another change, another change. At some point, you have to be respectful of everybody and make the best decision for all 7 school districts. I'm saying that the initial response was 2 things. 1, words their way, as long as the pilot teachers, and that's what we recommended, get to continue words their way next year. So you have the 2 schools plus like a 3rd school, because you have the 21 teachers. Yes, relief, that's what they wanted to hear. Please don't take that from us. Yay. The other part was, what do we have to do? Is it another one next year? Not everybody, and not a physical survey, but I'm telling you the response we got was, okay, good, so we're just going to get one more year to get all these under our belt. You'll work all those kinks out, and then we'll be ready, and we'll all work as a team to make it work for everybody. So I can't say that there aren't teachers out there saying, I want it. But most teachers are like, okay, good, give us just this time. And they already know that the model works.
So just like students have different learning styles, so do teachers. And I'm
Absolutely.
sure, even like Lisa and I were both teachers, but I think we probably would have different preferences in how we rolled it out. I mean, my preference, and I think the preference at Sellersville was rather than reinventing the wheel twice and making this work with Reading Street and then making this work with Words Their Way, I would prefer to do them together. And so you said that it's a mixed bag. Can the teachers who want to do it this year, because you were talking about not having the bandwidth to be able to support everyone, but if there's some teachers who want to do it next year, can they? And then doesn't that help you the following year when you roll it out to everyone else? Because then they have people in their own building who've been exposed to it for a year. And then you're kind of meeting the learning style of each of your teachers, because they may, be on different paces. Some of them may be writing gurus, and this may be easy to them. And they may be picking this up and saying, I'm ready to roll on. And then may be others who are like, give me more time with this before you start giving me something else. So is it possible to give that a little bit of flexibility, or?
The teachers who currently pilot it were volunteers. So we did not want to impose another program on, but we wanted to see what was going on. So you're talking about the people who already volunteered to do that. They're the ones who started. That's who we started with those volunteers. If you say, okay, so anyone else who would like to do that too, They're still on, okay, so maybe they'll get the benefit of being a writer and making me, but they're still not going to get words their way necessarily. And I don't know whether it's Seiler and Deibler, and everybody wants to do it, and then I have to say, well, only you can do it, and only you can do it. It just opens up a big can of worms where we can just make it, this is what we're going to do this year. To Hillary's point, people will talk and they may, try an example here or there. But you really then can't say, if you're saying, well, some teachers are going to want to do it. I can't control that all Deibler's teachers will want to do it. I don't know, maybe they will want to do it. Would I then go back and say, one more teacher from every building? Do you know what I'm saying? You can't control that if you say make it volunteer.
Because if everybody in a whole building wanted to do it, then wouldn't it make sense to let them do it?
I'm sure that probably there may be a building who would want to do it. I'm talking about being able to support them. But the way we see this as a model, we're going to be able to support the two schools with what we have. To the degree that we think they need, I'm going to open up another variable then I'm not sure what we can do with a third. And then they're going over to all those other 5 buildings instead of concentrating on the 2 buildings to ensure the success of the 2 buildings.
The power within professional development to be able to concentrate on something twice is much more significant than doing it once, 2 times. And so the writing model is we're doing writing, and then we're sort of forgetting about writing, although we're still doing it, and then we're doing writing again later. That professional development, even if it's the same number of people and same number of hours, is not as effective as having 2 years back to back in terms of that writing. Because what professional development will show is that once you get through it, the teachers are learning an awful lot the first year. Not that the students aren't, but the teachers are learning an awful lot about the program, how it connects back to, I would teach that differently. And to give them a second year and to give us a second year to provide that development to the teachers is, in my opinion, a really significant and important curriculum development model that we should continually think about when we're bringing something new that is significant as this. Mm-hmm. It's different if you're changing an elective course that doesn't impact the number of teachers or students that you're talking about. I think that level of change, often those people are rah, here we go. But when you're talking about a whole level and something as vital as literacy at the elementary level, to make sure that the teachers have had the time to do it well and learn it completely, and us to have 2 years to provide that development to them, I think is crucial to the success of the program, as well as the benefit for the teachers and for the kids. I do think institutional stress happens when the perception is you're changing all of the time, even if it's not actually changing all the time. I think there's something really important to be able to say, we're doing this for 2 years. I think that does allow people the time to go, okay, I'm going to have a chance to figure it out. I don't have to be perfect by June. I'm going to be perfect by next June, because then the next piece of the puzzle is coming. And those pieces connect, but it's new learning from that standpoint. So I really do advocate for the slowdown model. As Kathy said, we've talked an awful lot about this program, as well as with Stephanie and with Matt, the supervisors, in terms of their recommendations, which is why it's why it's the one we're bringing to you.
Okay. All right, I think we've covered all the ground. So at this point, I would just ask if everybody's comfortable moving it forward. Okay, thanks. All right. So the next item is the capstone course update. It's Dr. Scheid and Dr. Dormer.
I'll just let you know that in terms of the program of study, we updated the program of studies because our program of studies is broken into the AP course selections are by the content area, if that makes sense, or under science or under English or whatever. So what we added to the program of studies, and I believe it was updated today on page 4, where it talks about general information in the beginning of program of studies, we added some information about the new capstone course. But there's a lot of other information that's out there, and I did attach that, but we have Dr. Dormer here who's really spearheading this, and we'll have her just give you an overview, and then if you have any questions after that.
Is it on the,
Which one was, I'm sorry, this one?
I think the PDF browser plugin is.
This is just general information.
Yeah, there are a few documents up here that I'll just call your attention to that I shared with teachers at the end of last week when we just kind of gathered relevant information. This one and one other were put out and produced by the College Board. And I feel as though they give a nice overview of the key aspects and key points of the AP Seminar course, which, as we had discussed before, is the first course in the series of the AP Capstone program, and the only one that we're offering next year because it's a prerequisite for AP Research. So we can't offer research without allowing our students to take seminar. So this answers a lot of the very common questions. It gives an overview of what the program is, you know, how the kind of the diploma awarding works with, you know, students qualifying with a score of 3 or higher for other AP exams and completion of the series. It gives some sample topics of research, you know, again reviews the pedagogical framework, the quest model, and so forth. You know, I have this in front of me so I don't have to squint. Also how students are assessed within the program, and, you know, just kind of reviews each of the different aspects and components of the course. So I felt like this was good to share with teachers. It would answer some key questions, and students will also have access to this information. The next one is also a document that we prepared to share with our staff. And I'll be sharing a lot of this information with our students when they go meet with their guidance counselors on January 30th, to just give a general overview of the program. And again, mainly focusing on the AP Seminar courses is the one that's being offered, and just how it's going to be presented here at Pennridge High School, you know, in the context of the big picture, how it satisfies graduation requirements, it counts as an elective, it can be used as a general elective or a humanities elective. And then we came up with, Dr. Scheid advised me, and we worked together to come up with a list of frequently asked questions to, again, address some of the issues that, you know, just may come up. What is it? How's it being offered? Who's teaching it? Are there prerequisites? What can students investigate? And I feel like, you know, this component right here, some of the samples of student work that have come out of the program are just a real brief snapshot of the variety and diversity of topics that, you know, students can investigate. But I thought it was a pretty nice thing to include, because there's, you know, a lot of differences between the effect of texting on grammar skills and our LOLs and things like that, and food waste solutions, and the role of art in education and things like that, just really drawing attention to the fact that while listed in the program of studies as an English or a science course, you know, for the description, it really is much broader than that. Truly interdisciplinary, truly student-focused and student-generated ideas, and they can really pursue, well, their genuine interest. And one of the key things that I've recently read about student feedback from, you know, other schools in the state of Pennsylvania and beyond that have offered it, is students were saying it gave them an opportunity to study things that were not necessarily offered within the school, like the traditional school context. And that part was just so powerful for me to read, and, you know, moving forward, and it's like, wow, like, talk about authenticity of learning. It just really lets them go out there and dive right in. So one of the teachers did reply to the email about this information with, you know, a couple of really good questions, and just saying, you know, what are the advantages in terms of colleges and college applications? You know, a lot of our Pennridge students apply to some of the schools that aren't necessarily on the list that accept this as credit. The advantages are still there. Although they're not necessarily quoted as giving credit to these courses, they do still give preferential admissions decisions and things of that nature, early entrance into research programs, and those types of advantages that are not necessarily spelled out. And that goes beyond, again, of the institutions that are listed on the College Board website. So, you know, the reach extends farther than may be perceived just by reading information on the webpage, which is, we know, is usually the case. So, now the last piece is one that I would like to share with the students directly, because it's the brochure designed for students. And again, the language here is pretty much like, hey, this is a really cool program. These are the advantages of taking it. Here's an overview of what's required. Here's some things that you can study. hey, here's how it works and the expectations of, doing all that stuff. And again, some of the quotes from students who have taken the course. And again, the admissions advantages. What I do like about this is that obviously there's a little bit more of a college focus since it's a college board program. Right back here on the first page, so college and career. So right there, they're noticing that there are transferable skills that go beyond institutions of higher learning and even self-study. It is a lifelong, transferable skill set that you can use in any endeavor that you're undertaking. So this is, the kind of the key pieces of communication that we're making available. I am meeting with teachers at the high school on Wednesday afternoon as a follow-up to say, okay, we've given you a lot of kind of groundwork and basic information. If you have additional questions, what further clarification can we provide? So that when you're talking with students about interest in this program, you're really conveying the true picture of what it is and what it's not, and the expectations that go along with it. I will say that we're starting to get some inquiries. I received an email this morning from a guidance counselor who got one from a parent with some great questions, and we were able to answer those and move forward. So there is some enthusiasm out there in the community. So we're trying to ride that, and we'll see what kind of enrollment we get. Do you have further questions for me about how this information is being communicated or anything else? Yes, ma'am.
So one of the topics on here, the effects of sleep deprivation on academic achievement in teens, and how the kids came up with that as their research topic. There was actually a district who presented at the PSBA conference, and they talked about how their kids decided to do that as a big research project, and then they came and presented to the school board, and they did all this research, and they helped pave the way in their district to try to push for the later start times at the high school. And so it was actually partially a student effort based on the research that they did, and they came and tried to push for that. So I thought that was interesting. So we may get some some of this added
Be prepared.
I can share with you my former district. I actually mentored a student who did a study on freshmen and time spent on homework. His data analysis was a little bit complicated because he was relying mostly on self-report from these 9th grade students, but it was really interesting in the fact that many of them were truly honest about it and said, okay, I may have spent 2 hours, with my books open and things like that, but I actually spent about 22 minutes completing the work. And that was an interesting finding. He wasn't quite sure what to do with that information.
Yeah.
That's research, right?
Eye-opening and alarming, but with that particular student, because he had problems with, a lot of the data and the self-report nature, he actually had to go through and, draw conclusions that went against his hypotheses and his predictions. And really say, well, my study really didn't work out so well. But what he gained from that was probably far more powerful than had everything gone smoothly along the way. And he'll tell you that now, in hindsight, but during the process of working through and writing that report, it was difficult. And it's like, I don't want to say that it didn't work.
Yeah. I think my daughter needs to do that study. The other question I had, it says that it can only be recommendations by a science teacher, but it's under science and English. And I was just wondering, could an English teacher also refer to a science teacher if there's a student that's
Any
studying
teacher
else?
can refer to a science teacher. The limitation really comes from Power School. As soon as a teacher recommendation is required for a course, Power School says it can only be from one department.
Oh.
So we designated science basically because of me, having everything kind of come through. But we do want teachers to talk to each other about their students and just say, all right, although it has to go through a science teacher to make it in as an official recommendation, we really want to hear from anybody who feels strongly and will advocate for a student.
Dr. Dormer, what has been done or will be done to make sure that counselors are aware of this? Because they're often the first line. It'll take a year or so for the students and the parents to go, oh yeah, I remember now that thing they talked about. What have we done to make sure that counselors, as they're meeting with kids, are aware of the options here?
We actually met last week when we were talking about some other scheduling, considerations and options and laid out some groundwork. They also received all of this information and have a direct pipeline to me for any of the questions that come in, and to Dr. Scheid, of course, for any of the, impending concerns that come through. Like I said, I received an email this morning from a 9th grade counselor who was able to answer 2 of the 5 questions that were listed. And, within minutes, we got the other ones answered and sent right back. So we're doing what we can, and they are welcoming, of course, my presentation at the January 30th sessions with the students.
Okay.
So we are, obviously targeting those 9th and 10th grade sections, because those are the cohorts that we envision, having the strongest interest in AP seminar, because those are the ones that will be able to complete the 2-course sequence. Whereas, the 11th grade students right now will be rising 12th graders, and they would, if they chose to take it, would only get the opportunity to do seminar.
Thank
Not
you.
that we would deny it, but, it would be nice to complete the full program.
That actually answers, I was wondering that, because I'll have a
I
rising
hate to
senior
tell somebody
to.
no.
No.
I mean, the
I think it
again, the
stands
skills
alone
are
as
gonna-
being valuable, even if you can't complete it. It'll just give them kind of a head start of needing these skills when they go to college. So I still might encourage her to take it, even though it's only going to be half. I think it's excellent, but I've already, talked a lot about it before. But thank you again for bringing it. It's going to be very, very valuable to our
Yeah,
students.
Any additional communication that, you think is necessary, please let me know. We'll certainly get the information out there.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So,
I have one other update I just want to provide, just because I got the information this morning. And so we had some conversation around GPA and the limitations of Power School regarding them only being able to show 1 GPA. So if you remember, we had a conversation around the report cards and the whole unweighted GPA and term GPA versus cumulative GPA. So Diane Miller and Linda Beeler have been working really, really hard with the Carbon Lehigh IU, who is our conduit to Power School, to develop a screen that is going to be available for both students and parents through Power School. So it's not through Naviance, which is student only, that will provide cumulative weighted GPAs as well as quarter GPAs, although those are at least helpful, as well as unweighted GPAs. And so that information that they talked about will be available to parents. We're still waiting to hear whether it will be for the end of the second marking period or the end of the third marking period. And so we won't advertise that out to the community yet, but that will be coming to Power School thanks to the work of Linda Beeler and Diane Miller. So I just wanted to provide that update because it was something we had talked about and they found a way to make it happen. So,
Cool.
cool.
yeah.
Pulled it from the table.
Very good.
Got the right
All
table.
right. Right, so that was our last agenda item. The next curriculum committee meeting is February 4th, and we're back to public comment. Any public comment? This is very long.
Sue Furlong, West Rockville Township. I think it's really good that, we're focusing on reading and writing. Of course, that's extremely important. And I don't know, are we focused anything on the math? Did I miss that?
Are you referring to the elementary school?
Yeah, elementary. I have figures here for 6th grade, which is technically elementary. Central scored for English language arts. I'm going to round numbers. I'm just going to round. Excuse me. 33% at Central for English language arts. Performed at the advanced level, 10 or 11% at Central performed at advanced in math. So there's about a 22-point spread. Pennridge North at advanced math is 45%. I'm sorry, for English is at 45%. Pennridge North for math at advanced is 20. That's a large spread. For South, the English percent at advanced is 40. The math at South for advanced in math is 23%. And while I do believe, I mean, I honestly used to tell my son, you've got to be good at the writing and the reading, and he happened to be inclined towards math and science, I said, you know, you got to do all of it. But when I look at this, I'm at a loss for that big of a gap.
And
When I get to proficient, the largest gap is about 7 points. But here, at advanced, between the different math versus English language, I'm going 25 points.
So we've talked a lot about deficiencies in math. And when I presented the data, I did talk about the issues with math. So in terms of elementary math, we are on our 3rd year of everyday math. So everyday math 4. So we are pretty solid in math at the elementary level. Now we're going into our 2nd year, or 1st year for 8th grade, 2nd year of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math that has been adjusted. There's a big discrepancy between proficiency and advanced in math pretty much across the state in middle schools. We're all aware of that. Some of the issues behind that was more than just a single issue. One that I will highlight again is the fact that students who were taking Algebra 1 and Geometry in 7th and 8th grade weren't taking a PSSA content course. So in 6th, and I'll try to just make this as easy as I can. If you're in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and you're tested with PSSA 6, 7, and 8, and you're in the course that's designed with the standards and skills for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade for the state of Pennsylvania, you're taught all of those, you're tested all of those. Students in the middle schools, and not just in Pennridge, across the state, are given options in middle school. So I could be a 7th grader taking algebra, and I could be an 8th grader taking geometry, where I have different skills and standards I'm being taught. The idea of, oh, then I must have already gotten those other 6th and 7th grade skills somewhere else, well, isn't necessarily true. So while we have redesigned 6, 7, and 8, just in terms of math, basic programs, students still are taking algebra, and they're still being advanced to geometry. So as I said before when we met, was that we have looked at that curriculum, and to the degree that it makes sense, we are including instruction from PSSA standards, eligible content, in both those 7th and 8th grade courses. Algebra, if you take algebra, it is more difficult to try to infuse the PSSA skills and standards, but you have to maintain the integrity of the algebra course that you're giving to students. So we maintain the integrity and try to infuse some of those eligible content standards in there, and I have reviewed all of that. So to the degree that we can, we are in 7th grade. Geometry wasn't as difficult. We were able to infuse more of the eligible content skills into to the geometry course. So while I'm an 8th grader and I might be taking 8th grade math and I'm getting all those, I'm getting that, my counterpart who's taking geometry isn't. Now that those students will also have some exposure to get the students to be able to be more successful on that particular exam. So that's really the differential when you look at those scores between ELA and math in middle schools.
Are we the only district that moves the algebra and geometry to the middle school?
No.
Because I would think,
That's pretty common.
Yeah.
It's very common in middle schools. That's why you'll see across the state, the middle school math scores are just not strong. And it's because the students aren't taking those courses. They're advanced. So while it looks like they're not doing well because the PSSA is telling us, oh, well, they're not doing well in that, they're taking higher level courses than that.
But that happens in other districts.
It happens in most districts. I had a conversation, right before the holidays with Lower Merion School District who's trying to do the same thing. I'm like, oh, well, that's what we just did. And they're like, well, we're doing that. Like, everyone's trying to, because it gives a false impression to the community that these students are poor math students. These are students who are in 8th grade taking geometry, and it looks like they're not advanced, and they are. So it's a dilemma, and we're doing the very best we can, and not just us.